"I'm only marrying you to save your life," Sarah said, and her voice did not shake, though her hands were white around the fence rail. Jonas Cutter looked at her for a long moment, and then he smiled and said nothing at all. It was the smile that undid her more than any argument could have, because she had come prepared for refusal, prepared for pride, prepared for a man to spit at her feet and tell her he'd rather die free than live owing a woman. She had not prepared for that quiet, easy smile, like she'd told him something he already knew. She had ridden 2 hours from her father's spread to find him, past the dry creek bed and the burned-out remains of the Hendricks barn, because word had reached her that morning over coffee that Jonas Cutter owed $1,100 to Silas Graham, and that Graham meant to collect it in blood if the money didn't come by Friday. Everyone in the valley knew what Graham did to men who couldn't pay. There was a fresh grave out past the Larkin place that nobody spoke of directly, though everybody understood. Sarah Whitfield was 24 years old and had buried a mother, a brother, and any hope of a husband coming to ask for her hand, because her father's ranch had gone thin in the years since the drought, and men in that country did not marry poor. She had grown up hearing it said plain at dances and at church socials, in tones meant to be kind but never were, that she was a fine girl, a hard-working girl, but that a man needed a wife who came with something, land or cattle or at least a little coin, and the Whitfield place had none of those things left to offer. She had learned to hold her chin steady when the words came, to not let her face show what the words did to her insides, but she had never stopped feeling it, the particular cold of being looked over. What she had, though, that Silas Graham could not take from a married woman without a fight the whole county would notice, was 200 acres that had come down from her mother's side, land that sat untouched by any banknote, land that nobody but Sarah and her father even remembered still belonged clean to the Whitfields. She had not told Jonas Cutter this part yet. She only stood there in the yard with dust on her boots and told him she'd heard about the debt, and that she had a plan that would keep Graham's men off him, and that she needed him to marry her. "You don't even know me," Jonas said finally, when the smile faded into something more careful. "I know you pulled the Hargrove boy out from under his wagon when it rolled, and near broke your own leg doing it," she said. "I know you never once raised your voice at that mare of yours, even when she threw you twice in 1 week. I know enough." That's not knowing a man. That's knowing what he does when folks are watching. "Then tell me something true, and I'll know more." He was quiet a while, working his jaw the way men do when they are deciding whether to trust a stranger with something that costs them. "I'm going to lose the ranch," he said. "Bank already sent the second notice. Graham's debt is the smaller trouble, truth told. I borrowed against the herd to keep my mother in medicine the last 2 years of her life, and the herd's half gone to sickness since, and I don't have the money for either debt, let alone both." Sarah felt something in her chest loosen slightly, not because his trouble was smaller than she'd feared, but because he'd told her the truth of it without dressing it up, and that told her plenty about the kind of man he was. "Then it settled easier than you think," she said. "I've got land Graham can't touch and can't trace, not without a court fight he doesn't want, because it's never carried a note against it. If we marry, that land becomes yours too, under the law, and you can put it up as collateral quiet, through my father's lawyer in Cheyenne, and pay Graham off before Friday. The bank debt will work at slower, but you won't be dead by Saturday. You'd give away land your own family's kept clean for 2 generations, for me. For a man I've watched be decent when decency cost him something," Sarah said. "That's rare enough, I'm willing to bet on it." He didn't answer that with words. He only looked at her the way a man looks at weather he can't yet read, uncertain if it's coming to save him or drown him. And then he said, "All right," in a voice gone, rough, and that was the whole of his proposal and hers both, settled in a dusty yard, with his dog barking at nothing and the wind picking up loose hay off the fence line. They were married 8 days later by a circuit preacher who'd ridden in for a baptism and stayed on for the fee. Sarah wore her mother's blue dress, let out at the seams because she'd grown thinner that year on worry alone, and Jonas wore his one good coat, the collar gone soft with age, and neither of them looked at the other the way brides and grooms were meant to look, with soft eyes and trembling joy. They looked at each other like two people who had agreed to hold up the same roof, careful, watchful, waiting to see if the beams would hold. The money reached Graham on the Thursday before it was due, carried by her father's lawyer with papers signed proper and witnessed, and Graham's man rode out to look the arrangement over and left without incident, and that was the last the valley heard of that particular danger. But debts settle slower than they arrive, and living together settles slower still. The first weeks were an accounting of small frictions. Jonas kept his mother's kitchen exactly as she'd left it, down to the chipped blue pitcher on the third shelf, and when Sarah moved it to make room for her own mother's rolling pin, he moved it back that same evening without a word. And she moved it forward again the next morning, and this went on nearly a week before she finally said, "Your mother's gone, Jonas. I'm not trying to take her place, I'm only trying to find mine." He stood very still at that, hands on the table edge. "I know you're not her," he said. "I just don't rightly know who you are yet, and it's easier keeping things where they were than figuring out where they ought to go with somebody new in the house." "Then let's figure it," Sarah said, "instead of you moving that picture back every night like a ghost arguing with me." He almost smiled at that, the real kind, not the closed one he wore like armor. "Where do you want it?" he said, and she told him, and it stayed there after. That was how it went between them for a time. Arguments over pictures and chairs and whose way of banking the stove fire was the right way. Small wars that were really about something larger neither of them said outright, which was whether two people thrown together by debt and danger could build anything resembling a marriage, or whether they'd simply live as tenants under one roof until the arrangement wore thin and one of them left. The turning came on a night in late October, cold enough that ice had started. Skinning the water trough, when Jonas came in late from checking the herd and found Sarah at the table, with a lamp burned low, and her mother's ledger book open, her face wet in a way she hadn't let him see before. "What is it?" he said. And when she didn't answer right off, he crossed the room and sat across from her, which he'd not done before at that hour, usually keeping to his side of things. "My father's ranch," she said. "The drought years took more than I let on. He's behind at the bank too, same as you were. I didn't marry you only to save you, Jonas. I married you because I needed a husband who could vouch for me being settled and provided for, so the bank wouldn't press my father the way they were fixing to. I let you believe I was only being kind. I wasn't. I was scared for my own family, same as you were scared for yours, and I used what I had, which was land, to fix us both. And I never told you the second part of it because I was ashamed of needing saving myself." She expected anger. She'd braced for it the way she'd braced for his refusal that first day in the yard. What she got instead was Jonas reaching across the table and closing his hand over hers, rough-palmed, careful. "You think that makes what you did smaller," he said, "but it makes it bigger. You weren't handing out charity from someplace safe. You were drowning same as me and you reached out anyway. That's not a thing to be ashamed of. That's the only kind of help worth having." "You're not angry. I didn't say it plain from the start." "I didn't say everything plain either," he said. "I let you believe I married you only for the debt relief. Truth is, I'd noticed you before that day in the yard. Watched you at the Hendricks barn raising after the fire, working harder than any man there and never once complaining, and I'd thought, there's a woman who doesn't quit on a thing. I just never had two coins to rub together to come courting proper, so I never said a word. When you showed up needing a husband, I told myself it was only sense to agree. Wasn't only sense." Sarah sat with that a moment, the lamp hissing low, the cold pressing at the window pane. "Why didn't you say so?" "Same reason you didn't tell me about your father's ranch. Pride's a hard thing to set down, even when you're already asking a stranger to marry you to keep from getting shot." They sat like that a long while, hands joined on the table, the ledger book between them with its columns of debt that no longer felt quite so much like a wall, and more like a thing they might climb together. Winter came on hard after that, the kind of winter old-timers talked about for years afterward. Snow-packed waist-deep against the barn doors, cattle lost in drifts despite every effort to bring them in close. Jonas worked himself thin trying to save the herd, and Sarah worked alongside him in her father's old coat, because there was no keeping a woman by the fire when the alternative was losing everything twice over in one season. It was during this hard stretch that Silas Graham's true nature showed itself again. Because a man like that does not let a debt paid clean stay settled in his mind if there's more to be squeezed. Graham came himself in February, riding up with 2 men behind him, and told Jonas plain that the land put up as collateral through the lawyer in Cheyenne had, by his reading of the paper, a flaw in the filing, a technicality that meant the land might revert to being claimable after all, and that he intended to contest it in the territorial court unless Jonas paid him a second sum to make the trouble disappear. "That's a lie," Sarah said, standing in the doorway with flour still on her hands from the bread she'd been working. "That filing was done proper. My father's lawyer doesn't make mistakes like that." "Lawyers make all manner of mistakes when it's convenient for somebody with money to say they did," Graham said, not unkindly, which was somehow worse than if he'd sneered it. "Court might take a year to sort out. Might take your land clean away at the end of it, married or not. Cheaper for everybody if we settle it now, between us." Jonas stood very straight, and Sarah watched him decide something behind his eyes, the same careful weather-reading look he'd given her that first day in the yard. "Get off my land," Jonas said. "You want to take it to court? Take it to court. I paid you fair once already, and I won't be bled twice for a debt that's settled. If the filing's clean, which it is, you'll lose. And everybody in this valley will know exactly what you tried." Bold talk for a man with half a herd left and snow up to his roofline. "Bold enough," Jonas said, "because I've got something now I didn't have the last time you rode up here threatening me, which is a wife who'd stand in that doorway with flour on her hands and call you a liar to your face in front of your own men. A man doesn't scare easy once he's got that behind him." Graham looked at Sarah a long moment, then back at Jonas, and something in his face shifted, some calculation about which fights were worth the trouble. He turned his horse without another word and rode off with his men, and though the threat of court hung over them another few months, the filing held clean when it was finally examined by a circuit judge in the spring, exactly as Sarah's father's lawyer had sworn it would. And Graham's contest was thrown out with a scolding from the bench that made its way around the valley as a story told with some relish at the next several gatherings. But the winter had cost them dear regardless. By March, counting the dead stock and the feed bought at desperate prices to save what remained, Jonas and Sarah sat down together with the ledger and found themselves further behind than they'd been even before the marriage. The bank notice on the kitchen table no longer a distant worry, but a date circled in red, 30 days to make good on the debt or lose the ranch entire. "We could sell my land," Sarah said quietly, the words costing her plainly, because that land was the last thing standing between her family and ruin too, the last inheritance from a mother long buried. And giving it up meant giving up the one thing that had always been unquestionably hers. It would clear the banknote with something left over besides. We'd have nothing of my mother's left, but we'd have the ranch. Jonas was quiet a long time, turning his coffee cup slow between his hands. "I won't ask that of you," he said finally. "You're not asking, I'm offering." "Same as you offered me the collateral in the first place," he said, "and I let you because I was drowning, and too proud to say so plain, and it near cost you everything when Graham came sniffing after it again. I won't let it happen twice, not when there's another way." "What other way? We've turned every column of that ledger inside out for 2 weeks." "There's the bottomland along the creek," Jonas said. 40 acres my father never used, too rocky for grazing, but there's a fellow from the railroad survey been asking around the valley about right-of-way land for a spur line coming through next year. I turned him down flat back in the fall because I didn't want strangers cutting through Cutter land." Pride again. I'd rather sell 40 acres of rock than the last thing your mother left you." They rode out together the next morning to meet the railroad man, and the deal was struck within the week, enough money changing hands to clear the banknote with room to spare. And though it meant the sound of trains would come to that quiet valley within the year, a sound neither of them had asked for, it meant also that neither of them lost what mattered most, which was the last piece of family each of them had left. Spring came on gentle after that hard winter, the way it does after the worst is past. Green pushing up through mud that had been frozen solid for months. The creek running loud and full for the first time in years. Sarah stood in the yard one evening in April, watching Jonas mend fence in the low gold light, and she thought of that first day, standing in nearly this same spot, telling a stranger she was only marrying him to save his life, bracing for his pride to refuse her. He looked up and caught her watching, and there was that smile again, the same one from the yard 8 months before, except it didn't undo her the same way now. It settled her instead, warm and certain, the way a fire settles a room on a cold night. "What?" he said, walking over, wiping his hands on his shirt. "Nothing," she said. "Just remembering the first thing I ever said to you. That you were only marrying me to save my life." "That's the one." "And I smiled and said nothing," Jonas said, "because I didn't have the words yet for what I was thinking, which was that I hoped it wasn't only my life you'd end up saving." Sarah laughed, a real laugh, the kind that had been rare enough in her life before that year that she still noticed each time it came easy. "Turns out you saved a fair piece of mine, too." "Turns out we're square then," he said, and took her hand the way he had that night over the ledger book, careful and certain, both, and they stood in the yard together while the light went gold and then rose and then soft blue, two people who had married, to survive and found, somewhere in the accounting of debts and pride and hard winters, that they had built something neither of them had thought to ask for and would not now trade for anything the bank or Graham or the whole hard country could offer. And if you had asked Sarah Cutter years later, when her children were grown and the railroad, Spur ran steady through the valley and the old ledger book sat retired in a drawer with its columns long since balanced, what she remembered most about that first year, she would tell, "You." It wasn't the fear, or the debt, or even Graham's men riding up twice with threats. It was a man smiling and saying nothing in a dusty yard, and how she'd spent the rest of her life coming to understand exactly what that silence had meant.